With this tutorial, you'll learn how to create functional and interactive modal menus, pop-up windows, and tabs in your canvas. The position panel will be particularly useful for this tutorial. You will find it each time you select an element and then go to Design mode on the right side of your screen. In this panel, you'll be able to select out of 6 different types of positions, so you can specify how an element is positioned in the canvas. Each time you select one, you'll also be able to set a top, bottom, right, and left value to determine the final location of the positioned elements. Now let's review each one. If you select the static option, the element is positioned according to the normal flow of the canvas. The top, right, bottom, and left properties have no effect, so this is the default value. The relative position must be selected whenever you want other elements' positions to be relative to the one assigned with it. The element will be positioned according to the normal flow of the page layout and then offset relative to itself based on the values of top, right, bottom, and left. This will be used when creating drop-down or modal menus. We'll see it later. When creating a modal menu, the drop-down element should be absolute. This means it has no space in the layout and will be positioned relative to its closest positioned parent. In this example, it will be placed relative to the initial main button, which position is relative. The values of top, right, bottom, and left will be useful to align this element with its parent. The fixed position will be used if you need to maintain an element visible throughout the whole layout. It is commonly used to fix navbars to the top of the web page. A sticky element is positioned based on the user's scroll, so it is placed relative until a given offset position is met in the viewport, and then it sticks in place. Now let's move on to the canvas to see firsthand how each of them work. Start by defining the design you'll be building in Webcat. We have already designed the full page like we showed you in the previous video. You can find the link in the description below. And now we have added a drop-down menu which will be built with a div element, which we'll call the parent element, then another one which we'll call the drop-down, and it will include text. Now let's create the design in the canvas. We already have the menu, so go to the parent button from where the menu will appear and create a div element. Inside it, place a text element and set its design properties. Do not forget to assign a background color to the div element so it won't get mixed with the rest of the elements you already placed in the canvas. Let's also set a padding to it, and then let's arrange our text. We'll use a repeater so we won't create more elements. And once it looks like the design, let's arrange its position. Select the button from which the menu will appear, set its position to relative, and then go to the drop-down menu and assign an absolute position. This will guarantee the element's position will be relative to the parent element. Now let's play around a bit with the top, bottom, left, and right values, and there we'll have a drop-down menu. To display this design each time you click on the button, first create a variable of type scope boolean, we'll name it modal open, and then select the drop-down menu and in code mode in the show if field, assign the name of the variable you just created. Then create a procedure of type scope toggle connected to the variable in the corresponding field. And lastly, select the parent button and in code mode create a click event connected to this last procedure. Now let's preview it and click on it. You'll see a toggle icon in the element panel which you can use to hide or display your drop-down menu. Now let's check how to create a pop-up window. As usual, we have already created a design which will include a surface and an overlay as main components created with div elements. So we'll have a container, we'll have a text inside and an icon to close the pop-up. Let's say that pop-up comes out every time you click on the My Account button, so we'll create a div element which will be called pop-up from now on. Let's also create the two main components of the pop-up, a div element for the overlay and a div element for the surface. Let's arrange the elements. First, we'll select the pop-up element and using flex, we'll center everything. Then, we'll set its position to fixed and leave all the position fields with 0 to pin the div to all borders. We'll also assign a z-index value that is high to ensure that the element is always above the rest of the elements in the app. Now let's move on to the overlay, which will have the same fixed position and values except for the z-index value, which is not necessary this time. And then we'll also assign a background color. Now continuing with the surface, it will have a specific height and width measurements, and it will also have a white background color. To make sure it is always above any layer, we'll set it an absolute position. Looking back at the design, the surface will need an icon and a text element. So we have created those elements in the canvas, and using flex we will be centering them. Then we'll assign the correct icon using the props panel, and it will have an absolute position with the values of 0 in the top and right fields to pin it to the upper right side of the surface. Set the correct text, and once everything looks like the design, we'll move on to make it functional. Start by creating the exact same types of variables and procedures we used before. Variable of type scope boolean called popup open, and also a procedure of type scope toggle named toggle popup connected to this last variable. Now, whenever a user clicks on the overlay or on the close icon, the pop-up must hide. So select each and create a click event assigned to the toggle pop-up procedure. Select the pop-up element and in the show if field, assign its value to the variable created. And do not forget to assign a transition to it. Then select the trigger button, which in this case is named My Account, and create a click event with the pop-up procedure. Now before testing, we want to make sure all clickable elements are recognizable. To do so, select each and in Design mode in the Effect panel, assign your preferred cursor. We'll use a pointer for the button, the overlay and the close icon. Now preview it and test it. The tabs will look like this. There will be 3 of them to choose from, and there will be a specific place for the content of each. To create this design in the canvas, we'll start by creating a div element, which we'll call tabs. Inside it, we'll place a container with 2 div elements. One with a button called tab, and other with all the div content elements, which will also be 3. To make it easier for you to follow along, we'll name them all and we'll also create a text for each. Now let's make it work. To indicate users which tab they have selected while browsing, create a variable of type scope, number, and set its initial value to 0. We will call this currentTab. This variable is of type number because tabs will be recognized by Webcat with numbers. You'll see more about it in a minute. Let's connect the content with each corresponding tab. So select the first content and in code mode in the show if field assign the following expression. With the remaining elements perform the same process, but changing the numbering. So we'll have 0, 1 and 2. Now let's connect the tabs. Create a variable called tabs of type scope array and create 3 items, or the same number as the number of tabs you'll have. In the items 0, 1 and 2, assign a name, and keep in mind this name will be visible as the tab's name. Now save it and select the button and assign its repeater to the name of the variable. You will see all tabs are created automatically, however, we need to set the text. So select the text element of the button and set its text value to the following expression. Keep in mind that the index variable in the element visibility and repeat panel equals I, which in this case represents each number assigned, 0, 1 and 2. This is important because we'll use it in the next procedure we are creating. We are going to mutate the currentTab variable created before. So create a procedure of type scope, mutate variable, in the variable field select currentTab and the value will be I. We'll call the procedure setTab. Now let's use this procedure by selecting the button and creating a click event assigned to this procedure, setTab. Lastly, it is useful to point out which tab is selected, and that's usually done using color. So the easiest way is assigning a code in the background and text color of the buttons or tabs. So go to the color panel and write the following expression. This means if currentTab is selected, it will be black, and if not, it will be white. Now write the same expression in the text color option, but this time reversing the colors names. The text color will be white when selected and black when is not. Now go ahead and test your tabs.